testing and Cypress. And we will just make sure that we record this. Here we are. A little bit of learn to code. So let's get after it, folks. Let's see if we got a nice resolution, and you can clearly see everything that I'm doing. Who knows? Only time will tell. Introduction to end-to-end testing with Cypress. So what we will be talking about today is what acceptance tests are, aka also known as end-to-end tests, and a little bit of a difference between them. I will touch upon differences, some fundamental differences between acceptance tests and something that we call unit tests. If there is a pen and a paper anywhere close to you, I would definitely jot this down: acceptance tests and unit tests. And at this stage, I just want to tell you that the domain of testing has a lot of lingo that is sometimes hard to grasp and hard to come to terms with. And if you Google certain expressions like acceptance tests, E2E tests, some people claim this is the same thing, me included. Other people actually claim that there are two different things. Unit tests, component tests, integration tests. There's a lot of expressions. I will be trying to kind of narrow things down for you and for myself. We will talk about acceptance and unit tests. Do not introduce too many expressions at this stage. We will also be covering what Cypress is and how it works. Cypress is a framework, and I will also do a quick demo on how to set up Cypress in a project, and that project will be the challenge that you guys will be working with, which is the body mass index calculator. Okay. Well, I was in the wrong screen. Here I am. Right. All right. So why do we actually test things independently if we're testing, by end-to-end acceptance or unit or whatever, right? Generally speaking, I would definitely claim that there are many benefits from having automated tests. Your own sanity and your well-being is the primary one, right? Really. Even if you guys are like in a position where you think that there are so many other things that might be interesting for you to learn, and that testing is just a bit of an obstacle, I would still argue that it is better to test than not to test. It is best to write your test before you actually write implementation code, aka test-driven development. But nevertheless, I would say that it's better to test afterwards and have some test coverage of your code, even if you didn't write them up front. And why is that? Well, because it will help you to spot problems and bugs in your implementation code. And as I was demonstrating in another demo where we were writing those very simple tests in the FizzBuzz challenge, it does stimulate critical thinking, or thinking altogether. It stimulates thinking, which is a good thing, because sometimes when you read code, when you review code that other people have written, you just go, what was this person thinking? Also known as, what the fuck is this? WTF. So one of our primary objectives as professional developers is to minimize the amount of WTFs people shout out when they read our code. Do you understand? Like, if you leave some code for your project manager to review, or it even gets merged or anything, and somebody returns to it 2, 3, 4 months down the line, they should not get this feeling, what the fuck is this, when they read your code. So you can avoid that by having going through a intellectual process when you actually write your code, so you just don't write some random shit. You understand? Like, you write some random shit, it works, and you look at it again and you refactor it so it's nice, so people don't get upset or get heart attacks and shit like that, right? Okay, so you can also cover edge cases. Like, if you do think about the use cases and the scenarios uh, that your users might end up in when they are using your software, you might think, oh, what if this user doesn't pass in an email, um, but rather something else into this email field? Or what if there is some SQL injection being passed in through this form? Or what if, right? And by thinking in those what if terms, which is thinking, right, you can type it down, write it down in the form of a test, run it against your software, and figure out whether a nuclear attack will happen, or if your software is actually prepared to deal with edge cases. Of course, different languages in terms of um, I assume that we are talking about different UI languages. Yeah, so of course you can test that. And another thing is that if your software is dependent on time, you have to remember that you and your local host are not the center of the universe. I know it might sound like a weird idea, but because your mother has told you when you were growing up that you are the center of the universe, but you are not. There might be users out there and servers in different parts of the world, which is bigger than Sundarbari, and then uh, your systems won't work if they are dependent on time calculations, because time zones do matter and time needs to be normalized, and there are different ways to do that, and you can expose that if you simulate having your server in various places. Perhaps you don't use time, then you're all good, but if you do, you need to try it out and see what happens. um, of course, different data types, integers versus letters, exposes poorly written code. Already covered that, but it is it is about your well-being, your confidence, right? If you have written a function and you go like, I don't want to touch this. It works now. It's like a house made of cards, right? You just don't want to touch this. You just want to walk away from this, get that code out of your way, and move on to the next task. Well, if you do have automated tests and also version control, of course, you don't have to worry about these things. If you break that house of cards, you can always revert your version control. And if you run your tests against it, then you can slowly refactor your code, make it better. It doesn't matter if it fails in the process. You can always tweak and fix it and make a better implementation. And you can do that with great confidence. That you always know that your test is either working or not working. If it's not working, you continue to refactor until it does again, right? But also, if you want to upgrade some dependencies, I've been there many times. You pull down a project that is 6 months old or a year old or whatever, and you just go, I'm just going to upgrade the dependencies, the packages or the gems, and all of a sudden the entire hell breaks loose and nothing works, and you go like, wow. If you have automated tests, you can overcome some of those hurdles and obstacles, and be in a better place, basically, in a safe, warm, cozy place, just like your mom's, but without being the center of the universe. It's the same thing. Right. Uh, yeah, and of course, deployment. I forgot to mention deployment. You know, Actually, the entire point of our work is to get it out from our local hosts and push it up to a server that can actually be accessed by the users, because software doesn't do any good getting dusty in your file structure. It needs to be out there and do its job. And in terms of deployment, if you have a well tested code base, you can be fairly confident. There's nothing is certain in life, but you can be fairly confident that it might actually work when you push it out to a live server, which again is what we live for. All right, so I think these two Right. So let's start with this one actually. So a little bit about concepts. You know, when we write code and we have a method or a function, methods in Ruby are what functions are in JavaScript. It's just a different lingo. Right. So if you test an individual function, which by its nature is accepting zero or more attributes, right? Or arguments, sorry, not attributes, arguments. A function or a method that accepts zero or more arguments. So you pass in some data and you return some data out of it, right? So if you test that functionality, that a function or a method does what it's supposed to do, that is called unit testing. Okay? You test one unit in isolation. You pass in data and you say, oh, okay, it's supposed to return hello world. It returns hello world. Now, if you test many functions together, that is, so that they interact properly with each other, that is usually called an integration test. But when you test user interfaces, that an entire application does what it is supposed to do. Let's say, you want to enter, let's say it's a time schedule or time management system for employees. You enter a time when when an employee comes to work, and then you enter a time when he leaves work, and that should calculate how many hours he was at work, or she, of course. Uh, by actually typing things into the application and asserting that the outcome is what you want it to be, that is called acceptance tests. So you run a test against a set of features that proves that those features together, combined together, actually do what they're supposed to do, right? So your client, the name acceptance test comes from that your client says, hey, I want an interface where Luke is supposed to enter a time when he starts and time when he leaves work, and I want his timesheet to be updated with how many hours he worked. You go home, you code it, you go back to the client, and you show him that as an automated test, so that he says, okay, that is exactly what I wanted. He accepts your work. That's why we call them acceptance tests. They are also called end-to-end tests because of another reason. Because when we run them, we interact with the user interface, then a lot of shit is happening in our application, and then the outcome is also outputted on the interface, on the screen, right? So we interact with the interface. We do not really care how things are happening in the background, like underneath the hood. We only care about the end result. That's why we kind of call them end to end. The interface to interface kind of test without digging into the house. And that brings me to this slide, because well, there's a definition here. Acceptance tests help you in making sure that your application does what it is supposed to do when a user actually interacts with it. And the last sentence is really important, because acceptance tests or end-to-end tests, whatever you want to call them, they require very limited knowledge about the implementation itself, like how that application was being built. The only knowledge you have to have is how to use the application, not how it was built. Whereas, and that slide is missing from this slide deck, whereas unit tests, they actually require you, the tester, to understand how that function or method was being built and what sort of data it requires, and so on, right? So this is fairly big difference. Integration tests, which are something in between acceptance and unit, they do also require fairly good knowledge of how the program was being built altogether. Now, both unit testing and acceptance testing will be practiced throughout the bootcamp. It is a part of our tool belt. We will deal with them. We have a specific method that I wish I could say that we developed, nothing we do here is original, but we practice it extensively, and we call that um, acceptance unit test cycle. Which means that we mix acceptance tests with unit tests in a specific workflow. We start with acceptance tests, we write them until we need to write some functionality, then we forget about acceptance tests for a while, dive into the unit testing, fix that until they go green, then up to acceptance test again, run them, write a new scenario, and back and forward, right? But that workflow will come a little later in the bootcamp. I just want to say that the acceptance unit test cycle is also often referred to as outside-in testing, which means that we start with outside, with how the user interacts, and then we test the inside later. It's just a different name of the same concept. Outside in and acceptance unit test cycle is pretty much the same thing. But I think the AUT or acceptance unit tests, it sounds more cooler. It's like I don't know. I stuck with it. So let's talk about Cypress, because today we will only focus on acceptance tests or end-to-end testing, right? We will only test the implementation itself, or the end result of our work, and nothing else. And for that, I need to turn this off. Right, I just got lost in all my right, here we are. Good stuff. Right. So what is Cypress? Well, Cypress is a tool. It's a tool that we can use to write these kind of tests and execute them in a very visual and nice way. Now, you guys are new to this, so for you this might be the new normal, but for old guys like me, I can tell you that testing user interfaces, web-based applications, has been a real pain back in the days. When Cypress came along, it basically revolutionized the way front-end applications are being tested. It is much easier to do that, and it's a fairly new tool. It's been around for a few years, 3-4 years perhaps, and it's gaining popularity. And as a side note, as a bootcamp instructor, I can tell you that the prime objective with attending a bootcamp is, of course, to get a job in the industry. I think we can all agree with that. I've known students that have gotten jobs just because they know Cypress extensively. They are not great coders, but companies are implementing this tool, and there is a big demand on the market for people with good knowledge of these tools. So if you are looking to swiftly get into the industry, definitely focus on Cypress and front-end testing. Okay, but let's talk more about Cypress and show you some stuff. Right. So it is a framework for end-to-end testing, and that is, of course, not entirely true, because as with everything else in software, you can do many things with various tools. So you could, in principle, test your units and so on with Cypress, but it is not built for it per se. There are some extensions to this framework that would allow for like component testing, or in React, and even Node.js and so on. But primarily, it is created to test your user interfaces and your front-end applications. And it works on any front end. We often use it together with React, and for some reason, people think that you have to use it together with a framework like React or Vue or something. But I will prove to you in this demo that is not true. You can definitely use it on any application that is running on your local host, and on a remote host as well. You could, in principle, use it for scraping data with a little bit of tweaking, of course. But you can build bots with Cypress should you want to do that. The tests that we write are written in JavaScript, pure JavaScript, basically, nothing super fancy. You will recognize some of the syntax because it's, as many other testing frameworks, they are very similar to RSpec, so it should be the pretty much the same thing. And it's like we call it all-in-one framework. And again, to you people that might not mean anything, but back in the days when before Cypress, you needed to import. Well, let me put it like this: you were testing it using a tool, let's say Mocha, but then your assertions, they came from another framework that is called Chai, and yet then if you want to work with some fake objects and stubs and so on, you had to pull in yet another tool called Sign-On in this case, right? That's actually a real case scenario, Mocha Chai Sign-On, right? Now in Java, in Cypress, sorry, in Cypress you don't have to do that. All functionality is included in one package, and that is really good. It's kind of similar to RSpec. RSpec is also a one-in-all framework. You can extend it a little bit, but generally you have what you need to get the job done in one single source. And so that Cypress is like that, and that's a big thing actually, because back in the days it was totally different.
It was just for me when it's lagged right now. Really much. It was just
Damn it! What's going on with my computer?
Same here.
I don't know. I have like massive amount of memory. I have nothing else in running, and we're good to go. Are we still lagging, or am I back, or?
no, it's nice now.
No,
It's
no,
good
no,
now.
no.
It is.
It is
All right,
fine.
Lucas.
It is better if you will repeat what you said.
Right, I say a lot of shit, but let's say that it was it's a one-in-all framework. You get everything you need in one single application, which is good. And it's also, as I mentioned before, it's very visual, which means that it is at its best when you use it during your development process as you build your application, which is the idea of test-driven development. Write your test, think about stuff, and then run the implementation. But having said that, since we are working with user interfaces, and user interfaces needs to look in a specific way, colors, fonts, placement on screen and shit, that is also something that Cypress brings to the table, because it actually opens your application in a built-in browser, so you get to see things as they will look to your as your users will experience them. So that's a good thing. Right. So to wrap things up around, preaching the gospel of Cypress, I would say it's a solid platform for writing and automating user interface tests, UI tests. It comes with very powerful features built in. It has extremely well-written documentation, which is not something that you should take for granted. It has really good documentation and a very straightforward configuration, which is also something that you shouldn't take for granted. We will touch upon testing frameworks like Jest and Detox and some other stuff. Like Detox is for mobile application testing in React Native, and you will see what a shithole that is to configure things, and you will bang your head against your keyboard and wish you were dead. But then you will muster some more energy, and you will overcome any obstacles, of course, because you're a strong and intelligent individuals. Cypress, on the other hand, is straightforward, easy to use. It's a warm and nice place, just the way we like it, just like Mama's, trust me. So how does Cypress work? Well, it works the way it works, right? What am I supposed to say about that? I don't know. I can show you how it works. It's much better than talking about it, right? Because we're kind of nearing the situation where, I will be telling you the theory of swimming. We have to dive into the pool and get wet. So I think we're going to do that. But let me show you a little bit of code. This is a Cypress test. And if you look at it, it is remarkably alike the tests that we write in RSpec. But it's JavaScript. I showed you Mocha and Chai before when I did the FizzBuzz things. It's a little more parentheses, arrow functions, and semicolons. Well, you can omit the semicolons, but pretty much it's the same. It's the same thing. It has the describe blocks, which are like bundling together a group of tests. We have the it blocks, which are the test itself, right? That is very common. Then in this particular test, the describe block says user can check their BMI, user can enter weight and height. I would rephrase that, but that's beside the point. And then on line 4, again, we read code one line at a time, right? And it's really important. Reading code is an acquired skill. It's a very fundamental skill that you guys need to have. So we have line 4, and we say cy.visit and then a URL. Okay, so the fuck is the cy? Well, it's an object that represents Cypress, and we need to just accept that. I can tell you the technical background of why that is, but it doesn't really matter. We issue commands attached or bound to that cy object. So we say cy.visit, and that navigates to localhost 3001 in this case. That's pretty straightforward. Then we say here a weird thing, which I don't want to see you, right? cy contains BMI calculator. And whoever wrote that thinks that this is an assertion that we are testing something. We are not. It's semantics, but it's an important distinction, right? The test, what line 5 does is that it looks at the page and errors out if the text BMI calculator is not on the page. If the page that was loaded once we visited localhost 3001, if that page doesn't contain BMI calculator, then there's an error that is being thrown, right? And again, whoever wrote this, and it wasn't me, I promise, thinks that just because this throws an error, it's like testing whether this page actually contains that. And in a way, you could make an argument that is actually the case, but it isn't. The test would be formulated slightly different, and we will come to that because it's on line 12. Actually, that's a true test actually. But anyway, then forget about that. We go to line number 6. Then we do cy get and then in parentheses one argument with a hash sign or a pound sign or whatever we want to call it, and says wait. That hash sign represents an ID of an element. You see, HTML elements, they can have IDs on them. So apparently, we are saying that take whatever HTML object or a node that has this ID and type 90. Okay, and on line 7 we grab an element that is called height and type 186. And we're intelligent people, so we can probably by the context make out what it is, right? We're entering an input field that gathers the information about weight, 90 kilograms, height 186 centimeters. Pretty straightforward. And then we're looking at something that it has an ID of calculate with a capital C. I would never do that. You know me, Lucas. I would never do that. No. That's, IDs are lowercase always, never capitalized, never. And then you click on it. It's pretty straightforward. You just mimic the behavior of a user, because the user, if he would like to calculate his BMI, he would actually type in his height and weight and calculate, right? Just to trigger that functionality. And then for some reason we have that in a separate it block here, but on line 12 or on line 11 we're saying that it should display a BMI value of 26.01, which is slightly overweight, but it's not that bad. My wife still finds me attractive. That's actually my numbers. Well, it's not 90 anymore. Okay, it's let's say it's 99. It's below. It's not 3 digits. Not yet. Sometimes. Not yet. Not now. Not today. And so line 12 is the important one, because then we get another piece of the DOM, of the document object model, a node that has an ID of results, and here comes the test. Here comes the true assertion, not the one on line 5. That was nonsense. But we say that CY get results. That node should, and then we say contain 2601, right? That is the way we write tests in or assertions in Cypress. Not like the one on 5. That's nonsense, truly. So every test, whether it's a unit test or an acceptance test or anything like that, it has these 3 stages. Given there is some data and we actually process that data, then the end result should be something, right? And so given we perform certain actions on screen and we click on this thing, then the end result should be, in this case, 2601. That's pretty straightforward and nothing super fancy. So that's an anatomy of a Cypress test, pretty much. Any questions on that?
Can you actually write the last test like CY get results contains 2601? Or it's like a different function, like should contain and contains?
You know what? We will do a little bit of coding. I don't know the answer to that. You might probably, but remind me when I type, and then if I forget, and then we can try that actually.
Okay.
I would not let that slide in code review because I think that if you really want to assert, okay, I know the answer to that. The answer is yes, you can do that, but it's not an assertion. You can use that notation if you want to grab an element, but there's a but about the one that we sit on. In this case, if you use an ID, then that's like in Swedish we say hängslen och livrem, which is I don't know how to express that in English, but it's like double insurance. You know why? Because in HTML, a node, there can only be one node with a specific ID on screen. So if you say COI get and an ID results and then contains something, then you are looking for this thing twice, the same thing twice. Now, what you could do, I can see a use case for this. Let's say that you have multiple elements with the same class. So let's say that this wasn't an ID, but rather a class. So then you would say CY get dot results, right? And then among those elements, you want to choose a specific one containing some text, for instance. Then you would say contains and then some text, right? That would be a good way to grab an element or a node, and then you can call an assertion on that should exist or should be in the document or something like that. That is acceptable in my opinion, right? But I think we're getting a little bit ahead of ourselves. But good question, and yes, the short answer is yes. Okay. Do you agree with that, Lucas? I think I explained that fairly good, right?
Yeah, well, yeah, I would say it's another way to get an element that you can then run a test on it, like create an assertion on that element.
Right.
Right. So it's like using get, but get you kind of you toggle or you choose to go for an ID or a class or something. Where contains it's like it goes for the inner text of
inner text.
The element.
Yeah. All right. And so the good thing with Cypress is that these people that created this tool, they aggregated the best things from many different tools. I mentioned Mocha, and we have Mocha syntax in Cypress, because Cypress actually depends on Mocha, but you as a user never have to install it. But if you know about it, that's good. If you don't, you will learn that from the Cypress perspective. But we are using Mocha in Cypress, and we're also using Chai, and Chai is the assertion library that often goes hand in hand with Mocha, and we use that in Cypress as well. So all those examples on the Chai website and Chai documentation are valid for Cypress. They are just used slightly different, right? So if you see here the not chainer, like expect name not to equal Jane, as you see here, right? That is a Mocha assertion. In Cypress, you would take this not to equal and put it where as the first argument of the should notation. That is where we place the matchers. Should takes two arguments. First the matcher, then what it's supposed to match against. Okay. So we can use all these kinds of matchers, not to equal, to deep equal, to have ordered members, and so on and so forth. I'm not going to cover all of those matchers because some of them are really advanced, and they are not really they are not that often used in end-to-end testing. One that we used most of the time is actually the one that you've already seen, and that is the contain. Because you see, we are testing user interfaces in Cypress, so we usually want some stuff to be visible on the screen, and therefore we can use this matcher, the contain matcher. That's enough. Sometimes I scope it down to say contain text rather than just contain, but that's another thing. But we can use chai matchers in Cypress, and we can also use, they forgot to include that, we can also use fake objects. We can pretend that we have some data that we don't. And the most common use case is not actually fake objects, but actually overwriting parts of the functionality that comes with your browser. A very common use case is geolocation. You see, we will cover that later on in the bootcamp, but your browsers, they can answer to a question, where are you? And they can provide a pair of two values, the latitude and longitude, fairly correct, not super correct, but fairly correct. And you can use that to geofence somebody to determine where in the world he or she is. Now, when you write your test, similar to the time issues that we spoke about, you have to pretend that you are in Paris sometimes or in Tokyo, and we can make that happen using Cypress. We can tell Cypress that load this application, but before you load it, can we just modify the latitude and longitude of where you are, or the battery time of the computer that you are running on, or the languages available in your configuration, and so on and so forth, right? The navigator object in your browsers is extremely powerful and contains a lot of information, and we can override all of that stuff. Cypress has a website, lo and behold, CypressIO. That is your source of truth whenever you want to find any meaningful documentation. There is a docs section, and you should take a look on that. Now, let's forget about the fancy slide decks that people are preparing for me. Let's dive into some code. So I will just kill this one, right? And I will cd clear this up. I will cd into Craft Academy and demos, and I will do something like ls. Do we have BMI? Well, no, we don't. All right. So you guys have a set of instructions in your course documentation about the BMI challenge, right? And I assume that you all read about the BMI challenge. are there any questions about what BMI is and so on? You're all on board. Arun, your camera is off, but perhaps you want to turn this on back on again. All right, so let's not dwell on what BMI is. We're going to build a BMI calculator, but we're going to build it in a fairly test-driven way. This will be your first exposure to that process, so promise me not to rush this. Trust me when I tell you that the world will not be a better place if you finish the BMI challenge in 1 day versus 3 days, okay? But the world will be a better place if you learn a test-driven approach to software development, because then you can go out there and write good software, and then the end users, do not have to face any shitty applications, right? So trust me, just take your time and do everything one step at a time. Don't rush this. Just take it easy. And I speak of own experience because I rushed it. When I was learning about test-driven development, I thought it was like the worst, and I was like doing everything I could to skip it, and I had to pay for it later. So trust me on this one. Right. So we're gonna do a bit of setup first. The first thing we want to do is to create a folder, and we will call it BMI calculator. Or calculator, no spelling mistakes. That's awesome. And then I'm gonna cd into this guy, and then I will initialize a git repository, an empty git repository. So I will just say git init, and that will be enough for me now. Now I don't have a git repository yet on my GitHub account. I will create that later and connect my local Git repo with the remote one, but at this stage I don't have to do that yet. I can wait with that. Now I can follow the instructions that we give you in the course documentation. And just a disclaimer, when you watch my demo, sometimes I deviate a lot from these instructions, and that's not a bad thing. It's actually a good thing, I would say, because if I was here just to deliver the same thing that has been written, then I don't have to do it at all. You can read this instead or watch some recording. Now, sometimes I do things on my own because the instructions are just like pointers, right? You can do things in a different way. Of course, you guys are beginners, so we give you fairly detailed instructions. But again, nothing is set in stone, so you can do whatever you want. To be honest, so I'm actually gonna say something like echo BMI calculator demo, and I'm gonna say this. Can I do this, or I'm gonna do single quotes, right? And I'm gonna push this into a readme.md. Echo BMI calculator demo into the right. So now, if I do git status, I can see that I have a new README file created, and if I would open this in code, then we can see that there is a README file created in my root folder, and if I do a preview of that, so I can right click and open preview, we can see that there is a header created in there, because those two hash signs actually creates, it's markdown, so it creates a formatting of that text. But that's not really interesting. What was interesting, that I do have something that is not being tracked by version control, which means you guys have been practicing this, so all of this. Git add dot git commit am, and I can say something like first commit. Well, I hate first commit, fuck that. We'll say adds readme adds readme. That's what I do in this particular commit. Okay, all right. nothing super fancy. Now, up until now, you guys have not been they say that follow only chat for small time streamers is usually a deterrent. Well, sorry about not answering. I didn't have that screen up. Sorry about that. Anyways, let's get back to this thing. The interesting thing was what? Was to make a commit. We did a commit. Yes, that's. I got lost a little bit. You guys haven't been working with branches yet in Git, or have you? Some of you might have. No. Okay, so branches are like copies of your code that you can work on, and then merge into the main code base. So you kind of deviate from your code as it stands at any given point, and you write a new feature or some code about that, with tests and everything, and then you decide once you're done whether you want this into your main fold of your project. And so we will do that, and I will have a separate talk on working with Git more extensively, and branches and so on. So we will dive into this in more detail later. So what I will do now is, apart from clearing this so you see it better, I will do git checkout, and I will pass in a flag -b, and I will call this project setup. I can give it whatever name I want, but I will call it project setup. And why? Because Noel used that in the course documentation, so I want to be nice to Noel. Okay, so that will be that. And so you can see that now my prompt changed a little bit, and we will have a different we are working on a different branch, and you can always check that by saying git branch. And so we have two branches, one master and one project setup. I'm on the project setup at the moment. All right, I'm gonna initiate a Yarn project here. And why do I need to do that? Yeah, well, because I will be using some node packages, some npm packages, so I need to have that set up. So I'm just going to say yarn init and -y to answer all the questions with yes, and consequently on my in my project I will have a package JSON, and the package JSON will look something like this. In your case it will be a different name and so on, but we have the license, Thomas, index.js is the main, don't worry about that for now, and we have the name of the application, it's BMI calculator. So that's pretty okay. Now what we want to do is to say echo node modules into a new file that is called git. It's a hidden file, hence the dot git ignore. Just as a precaution, we need to do this always, and that is because we will be adding some dependencies. They will be stored in a folder called node modules, and we don't want to check in that folder to version control, because that folder can consist of several hundred thousands of files actually. The next thing I want to do is to say yarn add -d. It's a development dependency, and we're gonna just add Cypress here. Cypress. That's the package we need, and it's a development dependency, therefore we add the D flag here, and this will now install everything like this, and that should pretty much be done soon. This is my attempt to do small talk. while I install something. I usually just talk slower so that I have some time to finish my installation. Right, I just ran out of small talk.
This happens sometimes that it takes up to 3 minutes to pack the Cypress up.
Really?
Sure why.
Oh,
Happened, I think twice. It's kind of random. Sometimes it does it. Sometimes.
perhaps
Like
I'm on
that.
a... Yeah, that's weird.
So it was an issue in the beginning when it happened because I thought it was blocking out, so I kept starting.
Yeah, that's weird.
Eventually, I just waited.
So then it worked. Yeah.
That's what we'll have to be doing.
Right, we'll have to wait and see. That's really weird. Okay, well, now it's getting boring. Actually, it's getting kind of boring.
Exactly. Right. Getting impatient and
you know how I am. You know how I am. Yeah, exactly. Oh, I can't move on without this being installed. You know, so there's not much I can do.
Should I?
Could you get me some?
I'll throw it over.
Thanks. Thanks. Right. Still installing. That's nice. Or not. But it is what it is, I guess. Come on. Should I kill it and install it again? Okay, let's kill it and install it again. I'm a bit impatient. I probably shouldn't have killed it, because now it's going to take even longer. Yeah? Okay, well. Oh, no. It did. You're the man. You are the man. You are the man. Okay, we're good to go. Awesome. Let's see if we can get this thing moving. So now that we have that, we just, as a sanity check, because we're new at this, we're going to go over to our package JSON, and we have a new entry here. We have the development dependencies. That was hard to say for some reason, which is a good thing. And now the problem is that when your documentation was being written, we were in version 3.8.2, and now we are in version 6.7.1. And it might sound like our documentation is like really ancient, but it isn't. It's like 6 months old. A lot of shit happens in a short period of time. So time is slightly different in JavaScript world than everywhere else, right? In backend world, time moves slowly. Not many new things are happening. Whereas in JavaScript world, everything is like in ultra rapid. You have a new there was a point in time, not now actually, but there was like a point in time where there was a new JavaScript framework released every other day. So we have to bear that in mind. So right. So we need to run our tests somehow, right? And let's see if we can run them. Well, we don't have any tests, but we can run yarn. So we can say, can we do this? Yarn run Cypress open. Yarn run Cypress open. We can. And so another slow starter. because for the first time when you run Cypress on your computer, it needs to be verified and configured, and there's a lot of stuff happening in the background now. For instance, you see this probably on your screen, that where your machine is verifying Cypress and things like that. So that is important. And then there will be a user interface popping up for you, or no, or not. Really? Okay, let's do it again. The definition of insanity. You do the same thing twice with the hope that it will work. And in JavaScript world, it actually does work sometimes. It's an insane world, people, in my opinion at least. It's an insane world. And it looks like it was actually, I was actually right. It will work probably, which is like mind-blowing, but what are you gonna do? Right, so we have a piece of UI opening up for us, and Cypress is kind enough to create a lot of scaffolded test files that you as new Cypress users can take time and read through. They are very good, actually. They are all being placed in a specific folder, and we can actually run them because we're gonna wrap this up anyway in just a few seconds or minutes. So I'm gonna run these tests. I can say run 19 integration specs like this, and now it says opening Chrome, and we are opening up an interface. I didn't write these are just scaffolded for me, right? I will delete all of these in a bit, but for now we can probably just load them, and we will see a lot of tests being executed and run. And if you see, there are some interaction with this website that is being pulled up. You know, so we are basically automating some actions that users are undertaking with this website, whatever that website is. And you can select things on screen. You can click different elements, and so on and so forth, right? So let's stop this now. That's enough. There are a few, I don't know, few dozens of them. Now, I remember when I started out with using Cypress, I actually read through, not all of them, of course, but some of them, and you can learn a lot by doing that. And again, your ability to read code is really important for your success. So that is not a bad thing in any way. I would definitely encourage you to do that. But for now, what I will do is that I will return to tests, and I will stop the whole thing. And in my terminal, I will just press Control C on my computer to get out of that runner, and I will go into my here I am, right, into my project, and now I see that I have a few new things, right? I have the Cypress folder, and in the Cypress folder I have a few subfolders, and then I have this cypress.json file that it contains an empty object, right? So here in this particular file, and I don't know if your documentation actually mentions this, but we want to turn off Chrome security or Chrome web security. But before we do that, I need to actually figure out how that is. So you don't want to make any mistakes on this. So you want to do something like, right, here it is. You want to say Chrome web security, Chrome web security, right? And that would be false. And you also want to add probably the base URL, and that would be often set to http://localhost 3000, right? And then you want to format this so it's a well-formatted JSON object. And this is a good thing. Now, we are running out of time for this demo, but there are a few things here, right? We do not have any web application yet. We haven't set that up at all. The only thing we did was to set up the testing framework to set the ground for future testing. At this stage, I just want to go into the integration folder, and there is this examples subfolder in there. We want to delete all of that. At least I want to do that. You should have it around for a while, read through some of these tests, and then delete it. But do not keep it around, because these are just example tests, right? So this needs to go. And then in the next session, it's not going to be tomorrow, but on Thursday, I will go through what we use those subfolders for, the fixtures, the plugins, and the support. But know this, your tests are supposed to be placed directly under the integration folder, inside of the integration folder. That's where your tests will be. Right. That's pretty much what I had for you today. Arun, what do you say? Did you learn anything today?
Yep. When you were doing, streamings, I was hearing a lot about Cypress. I was curious, what is it? So I'm seeing it now. So yep. And so many things to understand yet. So I think it's a little hard for me to grasp it all. I think I'll go again with the video. That it will be better for me, I think.
Absolutely. And again, videos are great. Remember to actually go through the setup, and throughout the preparatory course and in the bootcamp, you will be doing this over and over and over and over again. It will become a second nature to you. Don't. This is your first exposure to that. David, your thoughts?
Yeah, it's very interesting. Very thoughtful, or how to say it. I learned a lot, and I have to, as Ara said, I have to watch it again, I think, and do step by step as you did, and I'll gå igenom documentation too on the through English, the documentation on the web page also. So I think it's quite interesting because I never done any test before. So I did a little, but not like when I was coding.
Okay.
So yeah, I want to do it. I know that this is it's very big market for this right now. I know this too.
Good.
Yeah,
Good.
Yeah, that's it.
Good.
Thank you.
All right, Luke.
Yeah, we got to learn. I remember I started one of the streams when you were using Cypress. I remember going, oh my god. But it was also quite fun, and I think it'll be definitely good to drive this test environment as also in a really good way. So now I'm looking forward to it. I've pulled up their website next to me, and it looks so much better than Ruby's documentation. I can say that already.
I would concur. I think, as I said, they have really good documentation on Cypress. So they've taken that to heart, because as I was saying before, one of the main criticism toward testing JavaScript apps was the lack of documentation, different standards that were out there. You just couldn't make out anything out of it. So these guys that are creating or working on Cypress, they are doing a fantastic job, I would say.
Yep. Yeah,
All right.
That's it. Looking forward to it.
Now, before you know it, you will be writing those pretty advanced tests that I was writing before. They weren't that just a lot of it. The sheer amount, it doesn't mean that it's hard. It's just a lot of it. Again, we read the code one line at a time, and so you can decipher all of this later soon enough. Thank you, Luke. Kim, your thoughts?
Yeah, it's completely new to me. So yeah, it's a lot of thinking, but it's interesting. So yeah, just start writing and testing, I suppose.
Exactly. Be a little Nike about it. Just do it. Right?
Yeah.
That's the Nike slogan. That's the spirit.
Yeah.
Awesome. Good stuff. Just keep on grinding. It will come to you, of course. Seva, your thoughts?
Well, yeah. Well, of course, I learned a lot. Like when I was working with like RSpec, I thought that how the hell can you not test like just individual function, but like a user interaction with the program, and if there is any possibility to do that, then Cypress looks like awesome.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah. Can't wait to try it out myself.
Awesome. Good stuff. Actually, I know that you wrote this implementation with where we could input so the FizzBuzz the game. I haven't had time to do this, but I can try to look at it this weekend, and we can write some automated tests in RSpec that actually interact with the terminal. It's doable. I haven't done it in years because I don't write this kind of applications, but I know that is doable. Basically, I would argue that everything is doable in software. Whatever you want to do, you can do it. It's just a matter of figuring out how. So let's see if we can find some time to figure out how we can interact with the terminal in a test environment. I think it has to be done. It must have been done by somebody else, so we can definitely find some resources on that. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Eva. Lucas, did I get everything right? Is there anything I missed here?
No, I think you got it right. Configuration looked fine.
Awesome.
Yeah. No, I remember, the testing, the whole testing kind of mentality, feeling like kind of a blocker a little bit in the beginning because, I just started out with JavaScript. I wanted to learn all the functionality, just get stuff done. And then, before doing that, I had to write these tests about it. And then I had to figure out how to write these tests. So you're kind of like learning, two languages at the same time, almost. Like it's written in JavaScript, but it's like the methods and the functionality is still separated a bit. So you have to kind of learn how both works. And that's just take that as it is and read through the documentation a little bit. Like don't worry about remembering it. Just think that everything can be tested, so that once you are thinking about what you want to do, then you can go and Google like, okay, how do I test that the button contains this text, and then you just Google that, and then the documentation will kind of lead you. So yeah, it's more about playing around with it. I'd say, and then that's what BMI is for.
Exactly. You have to start with something. Thank you for those words of wisdom. And Lucas has been through this program, so he knows what he's talking about. Me, on the other hand, I just created this program, so I don't know. I don't know how it feels. I usually say to students that I wish I could have attended a boot camp, especially this boot camp, but I never got the chance to do that. So here you are. Thank you very much for paying attention, and I really look forward to watching or examining your submissions once you guys are done with your BMI challenges. Make sure to follow the steps one step at a time, commit and push up. We, the coaches, we love to read through code, and it doesn't matter if it's not good or bad, if you made mistakes or typos and stuff like that. We're all here to learn, And having something written is better than not having something written, even if it's not 100% correct. So make sure to make use of version control. Don't push this off. Don't take this lightly. We from our perspective, from the coach's perspective, your GitHub repositories are the main source of knowledge about where you stand in terms of skills. Do you understand? Because if I ask you a question live, doing live coding, you might get nervous. You might, I don't know, you might forget at the heat of the moment, right? Now, if you and then when we hang up, the answer comes to you and you go like, oh shit, I knew this, why didn't I answer? So you see, the interaction between me and you is not always telling the entire truth, right? Me reading your code is really important. The situation can be also reversed, that you are very verbose, very articulative, and you can talk about code, but when it comes to writing code, you totally suck, right? So we need to know about that as well, because then we can help you and we can coach you and guide you to move forward. So write as much code, push up to GitHub, and we monitor your accounts. That's why we asked about your GitHub usernames in the beginning, right? Right on. I can't keep on talking forever, so I will stop now. Thank you very much, guys, for attending this demo. I see you tomorrow in the follow-up, and I want to hear some good news from you. Thanks.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Cheerios. Thomas.
All right. Let me just stop this.